Welcome to the podcast Running Toward. This podcast tells stories of ordinary people who couldn't look away once they saw the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted. Our guests share heartbreak that led them to take reluctant and unexpected small, faithful steps toward the most vulnerable in their communities. Not because they had a plan, and not because they felt ready, but because they couldn't unsee their pain. You'll hear how people living normal lives discover that getting closer changed them. Their comfort mattered less, their grip on uncertainty faded, and their faith got feet in quiet, everyday ways. Ending the crisis for one or for all isn't a quick fix. It's a long, slow, often messy journey alongside one of the most overlooked and misunderstood groups in our community. Running Toward gives you a front row seat to the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted, and to the ordinary people who choose not to look away. Hey everybody, today we are going to have a conversation that's a little different than our last one. Jocelyn, my friend Jocelyn is here today, and she did not stumble into foster care unaware. Adoption and loss were kind of part of her story from her childhood. She understood God's heart for vulnerable children long before foster care ever touched her own family. And yet knowing about foster care, knowing about God's heart didn't make obedience any easier. Because when foster care moved from something she believed in to something that impacted her life, her marriage, her kiddos, it became real. And they had a family and worked through that. And she had to work through that as a mom and a wife. So Jocelyn, today, welcome. Thanks for coming. And as we get started, can you just tell me about, adoption wasn't theoretical for you. It was part of your family story. So how did that shape your understanding of God's heart for vulnerable children?
Yeah, so when I was in elementary school, we adopted my sister, who was actually my cousin. So it was a kinship relationship adoption. But I think that the what stands out to me about that is just that God had a plan in it. It wasn't necessarily our family's plan, what my parents thought life would look like as far as building their family. But he was faithful in just creating a path forward in kind of the messiness of losing my aunt and my sister needing a forever place. And so, yeah, his heart in that was just really evident in seeing how he cared for my sister and then my family during that time.
So growing up with your adopted sister, you said, kind of loss was the beginning of that. What did you see about loss and belonging that maybe other kids, other families were missing, but yours was intimately experiencing because you had your cousin and now sister in your family?
I think that it was interesting to just be able to journey with her throughout elementary school. And as kids, we played and did all the normal kids stuff, but there was always this heaviness during that time and that season where she needed extra comfort and reassurance. And as the oldest sibling in the group, I just kind of fell into that spot with her, and we were inseparable. I mean, we lived life together. And shared a room and all the things. And so I was her confidant. I was her roommate. I was her encouragement, and vice versa. I mean, we were sisters, and it didn't feel out of place or awkward at all, but there was a heaviness about it.
So long before you and Ricky fostered, what did you already believe, theologically, about God's heart and concern for children and for the vulnerable? With your experience growing up, but also your experience growing up in the church.
Yeah. So I think that something I realized early on and just seeing my parents wrestle with bringing my sister into our family fully was that faith was a choice. It was very active, And so when they were wrestling with God of this isn't how we thought things were going to look, we had 2 kiddos, and now we're bringing Brittany in as our next child. And then even me as her oldest sister, really wrestling with God of what are you doing in this? Why? And that was a part of our journey. We didn't know what it was going to look like, and that was okay. But just that it was active, it was a choice to step into it, really stands out to me.
So you said that, it was unknown.
Yeah.
So how did having that unknown, how did that impact you growing up? A lot of kids, experience that, but some kids don't. Having that unknown side and having it right in front of your face, that like you're not really in control. Like you should have your mom your whole life, and now you have a sister in your life who her mom's not with her. How did that, like, being confronted with the truth of like, I'm not in control, how did that shape you?
Yeah, I think that up front when I was so young, I didn't really see it in that way. I just saw God's like faithfulness in our journey and in caring for her and bringing her in. But as we got a little bit older and she began to wrestle more with her identity and what happened as a child, I was confronted with this kind of like, why would you have let that happen, God? Like, why does she have to wrestle with this? Um, but then on the flip side of that, I could see him working in every member of my family along the way in teaching us and growing us and also in solidifying like we were a team in it, and I think my parents did a really good job of helping us rally together, work through hard things, have good conversations, and just be unified in the effort moving forward together.
Yeah. So flash forward, you're an adult, you're married now, you have if you have two biological kiddos, life is, on the treadmill, you're running full speed. What scared you most about how fostering might affect your kids after you and Ricky kind of came to that? You have this background, you've probably had conversations throughout your marriage, and now you're at a point in your life where you're like, I mean, maybe this is something we should consider as our family, but how are you thinking this might affect these two kids that I already have in my home? I've grown up in this.
Yeah. Well, when Noah and Naomi were little, I mean, they were only 3 and 1. Things were, I mean, they weren't easy, but they were settled. We had, our rhythms. Ricky was working, I was staying at home. It was tidy, if that was something you could say. Like, it wasn't easy. Obviously, having toddlers, little ones is hard, but, we could each grab one, tag team. We were good. And we could still pretty much do all the things we wanted to do. We could travel, we could visit family, we could go on a fly anywhere. So the idea of bringing in more kids just in general is kind of like, oh, a third kid, that's a lot. But to start fostering at that point, there was a lot of like, how will this change a lot of trajectory of like what we can do, how we'll be able to travel, be with family, do all the fun things, not just fun, but also keep balance,
Right.
Like it felt like we were in a good spot. So why would we mess that up? Kind of,
Right.
So
early on, you're kind of counting the cost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Really thinking through, I'm not going into this blind. I know that there'll be a cost associated with this. So that must have been in conversations that you and Ricky had a lot about, what is this going to look like? What is it going to cost us? And ultimately, is it worth it?
Yeah, for sure. People would say things like, I mean, you've already had 2 biological kids. Why don't you just have your third kid? Why would you risk, bringing in something so unknown, a kid that you don't know or at what age you don't know? And I think that Ricky and I really fell back on like just this settled feeling that God gave us once we had Noah and Naomi of like, you're good with biological kids. Like I felt a lot of peace about not having another child, birthing another child, and but that we were supposed to grow our family. So that unsettled, like settled but unsettled, gave us reassurance that that was the path we should be going towards, but it didn't necessarily make it easy. Like, okay, we got the green light, let's just go. It was kind of like, okay, go, but what does that mean? What does it look like? And so I think that what it ended up looking like was like each step we took, there was reassurance, but we still didn't know what the next one was going to be or felt this ultimate peace. People always ask me like, well, I mean, if I'm supposed to do this, I should just feel at peace. I'm like, no. Even today, I don't feel at peace about any of this. Right? There's peace for today, but as far as future and what things look like, it really is just an intentional choice each day to like step into what's next. Okay, what's next without knowing the whole picture.
Yeah, really. I mean, that's a lot of life, right? You can have faith. Yeah. And you can want to be obedient, but it doesn't mean that it's not hard. It doesn't mean that it's clean. It doesn't mean that it's smooth. It doesn't mean
and
there's any
back to how Noah and Naomi were then and thinking like, oh, we've got it all together. We didn't. We didn't have control. We didn't really have everything this smooth path sailing forward. It was a false sense of that,
For sure.
obviously. And so stepping into this kind of gives you more of a reality check, and God is in control. Like, what are you thinking that you have today that's not in his hands, you know?
Right. How did any kind of outside voices? I mean, you have a family that's walks through this. You have probably family friends that have, extended family that have seen all the things happening when you guys took in Brittany. So how did your family or your friends factor into your decision to foster, or did they?
There were a lot of voices. Gonna lie. I mean, between Ricky and I's conversation and then everybody else's, it was a lot to take in. I do think that, my sister's journey was hard, and it wasn't just hard in the beginning. It actually had much harder seasons later on. And so my parents were still healing from a lot of that and wrapping their brains around all of that. And so we weren't going into it blind thinking like, oh, adoption is pretty, just love them and they'll be fine. We knew the cost that adoption comes with a lot of loss, and that it's not just an upfront loss, that it is a journey through walking with them. So there was that side of it. But then there was also the other voices, I guess, that were kind of like, Noah and Naomi are two healthy kiddos. You've got, Ricky's doing well in his job. Like, why would you rock all this? What is the reason behind that? And then also look at how precious they are. Why would you want to hurt them potentially? So I did have to wrestle with kind of this guilty feeling of like, are we choosing to do this for other kids in a way that it might hurt them?
Right.
And that was another level, I feel like, of faith and trust that God had to work in me.
Right.
And just knowing like, if he's calling us to this, then he's calling our whole family to it. And I think that's when he really solidified this idea of like Teen Wilson that we have, because it wasn't just Ricky and I that were going to be fostering.
Right.
It was a family thing. And so we wanted the kids to be involved. We wanted them to know that this was part of their journey too, because it would affect them.
Right.
And I didn't think that it was going to be all roses for them. But I also feel like in getting to walk with Brittany through her journey, I knew God used that in my life. And that she also was worth whatever cost it was. I think that was a big part of it too, was that he had a plan for her, and it wasn't, easy, but she's worth it. And really every child is worth it.
So when you kind of talked about this earlier, but when you and Ricky finally were like, yes, we're going to go ahead, we're fostering, we've counted the cost, we've heard all the voices speak into it, we've really heard from the Lord, we feel like this is what we're supposed to do, we know there's a cost. Did you feel a peace, or was it more of like a resolve of like, no, this is what the next step of obedience looks like? Or were you like, no, this is going to be great. We're not like, what was that kind of, where were you when you were like, yes?
I don't think there was ever this just like, yes, feeling. I think it has always been a wrestle, and that's, not necessarily the way I would like it. If I'd rather and just be like, yes, you're doing it right. Go ahead and go.
Right. So it's going to be easy. Stay sailing.
Yeah. But as far as like when we felt like it was a go, I feel like he had just kind of put so many pieces in place that we could see. For instance, we were going to our church, and the foster adopt community was growing there. We had other people that we could do life with that were in this space. That was huge. In just giving us this like peace in that, knowing that we weren't doing it alone. And then also in transitioning us here to San Antonio, and Ricky's job being at a place like, God just kind of checked some boxes along the way to say like, I've got you.
Right.
So stepping into this is okay.
Right.
There wasn't just this piece about the actual fostering itself, but just around us and what he had given us in that time really is where the peace came from, I guess.
That you kind of spoke to this, but even more, what did you kind of expect God to provide that maybe didn't show up in a way you imagined in those early months and maybe year of fostering?
I think that probably it was more in the first experience of fostering. Like once we got into it, I kind of expected to have like more clarity and like direction of where we were headed with our first kiddo. And that was definitely not clear. There was a lot of roller coaster in that. I also thought that fostering would look like kids coming in and out a lot, and that was not our experience. Right. We had very long foster placements, which gave us a lot of time to just become their parents in that season and fill in that gap that they needed, and truly loved them as our own. So I didn't expect that to come so quickly, and that he would just say like, okay, this is your kiddo for this year, and love them, and keep them for however long I want you to, and then the next one. Like I kind of just expected it to be a little easier to just be like in and out versus like this long-term commitment.
So would you say you expected to be able to maybe guard your heart a little more than?
Yeah, I didn't expect to feel I guess as easily right away in this place of like mom to them.
Right.
And not in a replacement of their biological mom way, but just in like, I'll do anything for you. Like, and taking them places or whatever, thinking of them any differently, or I kind of thought it would be like, Noah and Naomi, and then we're fostering kiddos, and not just this like, this is all of our kids feeling so easily. And so it was sweet, but just kind of surprising how quickly kids, you fall in love with them, and you care for them like they're your own, and then do whatever you can for them.
So first placement, longer, you've had several placements, but going back to that kind of that first placement you had for what, over a year, right? What did letting go of that placement teach you about control?
Oh, I, in the moment was, or during that season, kind of like, God, why would you have Mikey be our first placement? Like, this is really hard and really, really painful. But looking back, I tell everyone I'm so thankful that was our first run with foster care, because God taught us so much. Michael came to us from the hospital, so he was newborn. Again, like just came right into the family. It felt like Noah and Naomi loved him as a sibling. We had him for many, many months, and it looked like we were going to adopt him, which again, that wasn't even really why we came into foster care. I didn't expect to adopt really quickly or anything. Like, we wanted to foster, not necessarily adopt. So anyways, when it looked like we were going to adopt our first placement, I was kind of like, whoa, okay, like, great. This is looking kind of tidy. Right. And then things really changed in the case about halfway through, about 9 months in, to where we got to meet his biological father. And Mikey's case taught us so much about loving more than just the child, but really seeing their whole family, and fostering the family versus just the kiddo. So when we met Michael's biological father, that was very much like, holy moly. I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? Because Mikey called us mom and dad. Mikey, the caseworkers are like, look how great he is in your family. And so it was very quick and easy for us to just feel like, okay, this is it. But then once we got to know his father, and he started doing visits with him, I truly felt like God slowly like loosened my grip of Michael as my own, and reminded me that he was his.
Right.
And so I think that my posture became, I love him so much I couldn't let him go, to I love you so much I'm willing to do whatever God wants me to do for you and for your family.
Right.
And so when we finished our fostering of Mikey, he was about 15 months old, and we got to drive him to his dad's home. And I will never forget this in a million years, but Ricky and I are in the front seat. Our 3 kiddos are in the back. And I'm kind of fighting back tears thinking, God, you brought us to this moment. It's beautiful, but hard, and just wrestling still with, I can't believe we're doing this. And I look in the back seat, and Noah, who's about 4 at the time, is smiling. And I'm like, Noah, how are you doing, buddy? And he's like, great. Mikey's going home to his daddy.
Yeah.
And it was just like in that moment, God really solidified to me like how simple all this is. Like we got to take Michael home to his dad.
Yeah.
And so when I think about Noah and Naomi and their first journey in fostering Michael and how much they love him as their sibling, how hard it was for them to take him to his dad's house, to them it was like, of course you want to be with your dad.
Right.
Like, of course I would want to be with my dad. We're taking him to his daddy. Like they were so excited. And so it wasn't this mourning that we went through afterwards. It was a wrestling of like, wow, that was hard.
Yeah.
But also just so encouraged by how God used it to help us love Michael's whole family.
Yeah.
You know,
there had to have still been like grief and sadness.
Yeah.
Like still a little bit of like, really? Like we full sent it as his parents. And then you were like, you like pulled that away. It was almost like, a loss again, but almost like the opposite of kind of what happened growing up with your sister. Like how did the grief show up later maybe, or maybe it didn't? Was there a period where you guys were like, whew, that's really hard?
I mean, we definitely needed to regroup afterwards because that was an emotional roller coaster. I mean, those 15 months were a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotional energy, but also like a big faith journey too, And so I think once we dropped Mikey off at his house and got back home, there was a time where Ricky and I had to regroup together in our, in our marriage, kind of like, whoa, what just happened? Also kind of an excitement though of like, look what we're capable of as a family,
right?
With God doing, walking with us in this journey. So we took a break, regrouped with Noah and Naomi a little bit and just kind of process things. But I'll be honest, it was more of like it lit a fire in us, I think, taking him home and seeing what God was capable of, because the way that we pictured Mikey's journey going, I mean, this was totally not it.
Right.
And it was so much better than we expected. So when I think about like keeping Mikey forever used to be my thought of like, this would be the best thing for him, and seeing that God's plans were so much better. That really encouraged us in moving forward of like, again, we don't need to know the plan.
Right.
We don't need to know what the outcome is going to be. Like God had us in all of it. He took care of Noah and Naomi. He helped us through all of those hard moments where we wrestled with like, how do we have conversations with Mikey's dad? How do we bring him to, along in this journey where we thought Michael was ours and now he's not. Just that whole wrestle, like the way that God walked with us in that and how closely we felt his presence, it's almost addictive. Like, okay, Lord, we want more of that. Like we want to need you so badly that we feel you on a daily basis, just knowing that you're in this with us. And we can't do it on our own. Like there was nothing in my mom heart that could have done that by myself.
Right.
Nothing. That is not natural to drop your 15-month-old at someone else's house at all. So that's where I tell, like, when people ask me, how did you do that? I'm like, I did not do that. There is no physical way I could have done that.
Right.
And when I think about it, I could cry at any moment, just thinking how much I had to wrestle with God in that. But also how thankful I am that he made me do that,
Yeah. Yeah. So I know y'all fostered way more kids than that, adopted, we won't dive into all those, but even in that, your journey of what, 8, 10, how long you been fostering?
10-ish years total. Yeah.
10 years of fostering, lots of experiences. What's today, even now, 10 years deep, what still feels heavy about foster care?
I think that what feels heaviest is probably the pain that kids are going through in the midst of it. And that's probably what I still have to wrestle with God the most on. Even when I think about my children that we've adopted now, the pain that is still a part of the brokenness of needing to be adopted, you know. So trusting that he is going to fill, you know, the gap of like what they need and all of that, because we can't take that pain away. Even in fostering kiddos and bringing them into our home, like we can be there for them, but there is this heaviness and pain and loss that they're going through that I can't put a Band-Aid on that, and that feels really heavy.
Yeah, I think one of the things you and I both experienced is that there's a belief or a myth, or even if people wouldn't say it's their belief, they think once the gavel drops and there's adoption, one, that's the best scenario. Yes, we all know is not.
Yeah.
And secondly, that then everything's rainbows and unicorns after the gavel drops and adoption. So what is the journey, the obedient, there's the yes to foster care. There's the yes to, we're going to give you our last name. But then there's the yes to all the rest of it that comes with it. Where has that obedience to the yes, the first yes, the second yes, and the long yes, where does that obedience still feel costly for you, for Ricky, for Noah and Naomi? Like, where does that still feel really costly, even now?
Totally agree that, yeah, the foster journey, you know, may end when adoption happens and they're forever, you know, having your last name and in your home. But I really think that is only the beginning of their journey, as they kind of face what's next, in becoming who God is calling them to be. So when I think about the cost of that, I can see that, because for several of our children, you know, that the trauma doesn't end. Their behaviors, their emotional struggles, they don't end at adoption. It kind of is a spot where they actually get to start dealing with it because they're able to settle in. And so there is a daily cost of walking with kiddos through their trauma. It is heavy and messy, and also just costly in that I think about, like, there's physical, emotional, mental, there's all the levels, you know. For one of our kiddos, you know, he's physically a lot of cost for me. I mean, I'm running down the street chasing him half the time, trying to help him process things. And for another one of my kids, it is more emotional. You know, I can't give her the answers that she is wanting right now. And so trusting that God is going to provide for Ricky and I and our parenting for each step of their journey is really difficult sometimes, because I'm like, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to be able to share what she needs to know in the future. I don't know how I'm going to be able to help her process, you know, why she's here and all these why type questions. And I think that something that God gives us is just like this peace, and I will provide for today, you know. And so I really have to just stop myself from thinking too far ahead and remember this is a journey, and he's providing today what I need. And you know, I can give them in my, you know, mothering and parenting of them what they need in this moment, and I don't have to know how I'm going to provide for the next.
Yeah. One of the things I tell my kids all the time is you can only control what you can control. And so you really, the only thing, yesterday's gone, tomorrow is out of your control. Really, the only thing you can steward is today, and whatever today presents with the gifts and talents and position and experience that the Lord's given you. So with that, it leaves a million unanswered questions, a million things that you're like, brain can run on in you know, rabbit trails, in nauseum, so many. But are there still any specific questions that you still take to God? You don't have an answer for, but it's one of those that you just keep asking him, like, man, Lord, if you can, you know, shine some light here. What are some of those questions in this realm of momming, wifing, foster care, any of them that you still are just unresolved and may always be unresolved?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think the question of why in so many areas is probably the biggest one, because you can ask why about a million things.
Right.
And so, yeah, I wrestle with a lot of like, why did this happen to them? Why wouldn't you have protected them before they were here? And also kind of this unresolved forgiveness or lack of forgiveness for what had happened to them before they came to us, whether that's how I feel about their biological parents and decisions they made, or how I feel about whether or not, God, were you even there? Like, why would you have allowed that? Because I can see the ramifications of all those things now every day.
Right.
And it makes me frustrated and sad and angry as a mom to have to see them hurting. So when I go, it is that looking backward and like, where were you in this?
Yeah.
Also, like, where were you for their mom? Like, right. If their mom was careful, like the domino effect, seeing the domino effect, all this generational stuff and the pain that now my children are enduring.
Right.
There is that like why question that can rattle me, that I just really have to remember that through all the places in my life I've seen his faithfulness, that he is faithful now in this. And I'm not going to know the answers to those things, and I have to be okay with that.
Yeah. It's that, that phrase, he just gives us enough for today.
Yeah.
And we have to trust
him tomorrow. I'm thankful I have a need for today, because
yes. Yeah. It's that, like when he, in the Old Testament, he's feeding the Israelites, it was a manna for the day. They didn't get it for tomorrow. And I think that is like the overarching, in all the stories that we're going to be telling, in my personal story, I think the overarching thread through all of it is that you really have to become dependent on the Lord. And if you don't, this system, these kiddos and their trauma are going to chew you up and spit you out. And you're either going to come out on the side where you're like, okay, God, like I surrender. I know you're in control. I don't understand it. I don't even really like it, but I have faith that you're in this. Or you're just going to run away screaming and throw your hands up and be like, I'm out. I just, fingers in my ears, hands over my eyes. Like, I don't even want to see. I don't want to know. I'm just going to run from it. So I thank you for telling your story today. Is there anything else you wanted to say that we didn't get to today?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm thankful for the journey. I think that most of the time we do get afraid when we look too far ahead. But when I think about the journey that God's taken our family on and how faithful he's been, like I was saying, and how much he's taught us about like that letting go of control and just allowing him to work, it makes me excited for the future when I look at those things and know that he's in it and that he is faithful, rather than living in this grappling for control. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that he's given me in all of this, is just this freedom to trust him and know that walking in faith with him each day, day by day, he'll take it. He's got it.
And it's going to be messy.
Yeah.
It's going to be complicated.
But the journey is worth it. And, what he has in it is so good.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for listening today. We hope this whole story just kind of shed some light on the foster care story, things that maybe you didn't know about it, maybe angles you hadn't seen it from. And we just thank you for taking the time to listen today to the Running Toward podcast.